like at the supper table, right?
No, you just get whacked behind the head until you knock it off. They would,
15, 16,
a warning.
something like that.
Yep.
They would also, if one was just popped up somewhere, that's been reported in the past. Oh,
I only heard the update
I
from
stayed with
Tuesday.
a
At 25 minutes.
family whose, the dad was a pilot for, I want to say North, and he flew like overseas
did have a taxi.
and his son was a cadet. His son was already flying like crazy. And he's still in high school. He's going to graduate. I will be graduating this
We're gonna get going.
You start losing it, you just figure out what the
year. But he wants to be in jet, pilot jet.
Oh, we're late already. Let's go.
That's his
Wait
goal.
for Mark. He went running.
Without going to the city council.
Does he?
Speed-wise.
I love it when people.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hutchinson City Council meeting for Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. Approve the council agenda and any agenda additions or corrections.
Mayor and council have one addition I'd like for you to consider. It'd be item number 4C. It's regarding the Camerath donation. It's a assignment of copyright and licensing agreement.
I'll make a motion to approve that with that correction.
Second.
Motion by Mary, second by Dave to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Invocation. We'll just have a moment of silence. Next is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
recognitions of gifts, donations, and community service to the city. Does anybody have anything tonight? I do have a proclamation. I, Gary T. Forcier, Mayor, proclaim September 11th, 2019 as Direct Support Professional Day. Accepting, we do have a resolution under there, Resolution 15079, accepting donation of property from John and Keith Camrath.
Mayor and council, I know we've had, I guess, some brief discussion on this in the past, and there was some pictures and stuff included, but I'd maybe first like to welcome, I guess, the whole Camrath family maybe to come forth and just kind of, I know you guys brought, I think, is it a clay or a wax, just to kind of let everyone know what they're looking at. You've got included within your packet a resolution. I think we've got everything figured out in regards to where it's going in the park, the language that's going to be on the plaque, and at least wanted to give them the opportunity to kind of introduce what it's going to look like, so you guys have an idea, and maybe tell a little bit more. So if you guys want to come forward.
So, Mayor, members of the council, so introductions. So I'm Keith Camrath, my wife Lisa Camrath, and then our son John Camrath. So Lisa and I have commissioned John, who is a bronze sculptor, to create a life-size bronze statue of a soldier that we would like to have, we'd like to give as a gift to the city of Hutchinson to be placed on permanent display in the McLeod County Veterans Memorial Park. And you can take a look at this. This is a wax copy of what we plan to do. This will be digitized by the foundry and will be converted into a 6 foot tall, roughly, life-size version of that. So, and that'll be completed in bronze. And we've been in discussion, this has started actually a little over a year ago. So we've talked with the Veterans Park Board, the Arts Commission, we've talked with the City of Hutchinson. Dolph and Matt have been a great help in the process. And I've worked through a number of questions surrounding the statue. One revolved around the plaque, and I think you have a copy of the verbiage for that. So that, I think, was the agreed upon verbiage for the plaque that will be, I think, somewhere right near the statue. And then also we met in the park a week ago to agree on the location. And I think you have a copy of a map kind of in that little cluster of trees that are right kind of across the walkway, you know, from the parking lot. So just some points that we want to make sure that are clear, and I think you have a copy of all these, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that the City of Hutchinson will become the owner upon completion. So if any maintenance, liability, I mean, you're the owner of this piece once you know, we turn it over to you. The City of Hutchinson has agreed to provide any sort of site prep, landscaping, walkway, installation. Again, we've had discussions with Dolph about kind of the details of that. The City of Hutchinson will provide the plaque that would be part of that site, and again, we've agreed upon the verbiage that I think you have a copy of. So, and then if any repairs, if there was some damage that were to occur in the future, we would just ask that you'd give John the courtesy of consulting with him first before you make any changes or do any repairs to that. And then if at any time in the future the City of Hutchinson discontinues the public display of this statue, you know, if you're going to put it in the warehouse next to the mowers at the Park and Rec building, we'd ask that you would just, you know, donate it back to the Camrath family. So, and by the way, there is no Camrath Foundation. We're not that sophisticated. This is just Lisa and me. So, and we are happy to do this. My dad, you know, outside of his family, there's probably nothing he was more proud of. So, and you know, we wanted to do this in recognition of the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. So, and we're expecting that, you know, if things go, this is kind of the big step we got from, you know, to the wax version of this. But you know, now John is going to be working with the foundry, so he is going to be doing this. Normally, he originally started as a bronze sculptor when he graduated from Gustavus, and but had a full studio, you know. So now he's going to be completing this, you know, in his house and working with the foundry. So this is the big step to actually produce this from here. But assuming everything goes as expected, we hope to have this hopefully dedicated or installed by Memorial Day next spring. So that would be ideal. So John, do you have any thoughts, comments?
So John, how's this work? You make a bigger version of that?
Yeah, so this will be turned into a life-size armature, essentially, and then I'll do the finish detail on that, and then turn it back over to be converted to bronze. So in the end, it'll be this, but 6 feet tall.
Okay. I like how it looks. It
Thanks.
looks like a soldier.
So
Thanks to the
questions?
Camrath family.
Glad to do it. So, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh, and then I guess the additional piece on the agenda, the copyright, you know, we had actually kind of had some of these discussions a long time ago, and we thought, well, we better just collect all these here now when we're doing this all at once. But basically, we are commissioning John to give you a copy of this statue. Whether another copy is ever made, you know, I don't know. I guess thinking of protecting John's rights to be able to reproduce that in any size. So if there was another, you know, place across the country or someplace that wanted to pay him to do that, you know, I'd like to be able to have him have the opportunity to do that. So, or sell miniatures or whatever. So anyway, the rights stay with him.
Understandable.
Okay.
Will this
Thank
one
you.
be numbered, like number one?
Mayor and council, just kind of with the fact that you're accepting the donation and there's this copyright agreement, I guess Mark and I's preference would be you do them both at the same time. So,
Just wanted to add one thing, you know, for the minutes too, when we talked with Keith and Dolph and the Public Arts Commission approve spending $1,500 towards that installation cost. At the time, Dolph estimated it would be about $3,000, so we would split that between the Parks Department, Public Arts, so. So anyway, just wanted to note that.
We have a
So I
motion.
would make a motion to accept the directions as well as including this additional language as part of that.
I will second that.
Motion by Steve, second by Chad to approve the resolution and the copyright agreement. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for working all through this. It's,
Keep you updated. Thank you.
Next is citizens addressing the council. Anybody want to address the council? All right, we have approval of minutes. We have the workshop of August 27th, 2019, and regular meeting minutes of August 27th, 2019.
motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Chad to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent agenda, this will be done by one motion unless somebody pulls something off for discussion. A is consideration for approval of resolution number 15090, resolution establishing location for traffic controlled device, no parking signs to be removed from the north side of Denver Avenue southeast between Bradford Street southeast and Sherwood Street southeast. We go to C, approval of wastewater treatment facility ditch aeration project construction. D is approval of 2019 recycle aggregate crushing service. And D is claims appropriation and contract payments. Anybody want anything pulled off?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We have review of potential Civil Air Patrol site at the City of Hutchinson's Airport. Mr. Olson.
Mr. Dave Scar is a member of the Airport Commission and brought to us some information relative to a potentially very cool project that could land in Hutchinson. And so I would like to introduce the Minnesota Wing Commander for the Civil Air Patrol, Colonel James Garlow, and he will have a presentation. There'll be a short video also during this, and so I would ask that you please welcome Colonel Garlow. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for having me here this evening to talk to you a little bit about our project. I'd like to show you a brief video if that's okay, but Mr. Mayor, before we get into that, I need to let you know it's 5 minutes long, and then if you have questions or you want to let me talk a little bit after that, I might go a little beyond the 7 minutes. Is that all right?
No, that's fine, but could you introduce your guest?
I will do that, certainly, sir. You know Dave Scar. You might have met him before. Sitting next to me is Colonel Kevin Slowinski. He's a former Minnesota Wing Commander and is our government relations officer. And next to him is Captain Bruce Anthony, who is the project coordinator and director, actually. He's in charge. I just do what he tells me. That's the way it always works, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Watch the video here real quick, and then I'll give you some Minnesota's information. turn the volume up a
I
little?
don't know, can we, is there any more? I'm sorry,
That's it, huh?
I'm afraid so.
I hope you can hear it. We'll all be quiet.
John, can you put the mic by the speaker?
I apologize, folks. It kind of loses something without the audio. So,
Volume down on the bottom there?
Let me try.
Is there one in the monitor there?
Yeah, let me see if I can get it.
I can go up there.
All right. Let's see if I can do it down here. Maybe.
Right click.
where's those Microsoft people when you need them?
Speakers are at 80%. Minimize the screen, John.
Anybody want to buy a computer? It's not letting me in there. Shoot.
This is the mixer, I believe.
Okay, now everything's cranked. I get nothing.
Well, perhaps, Mr. Mayor and council members, while they're trying to fix that, I could go on and do the rest of the presentation, and that way we're not wasting time. Does that make sense? If we go back into the PowerPoint, to the second page of the PowerPoint, which I don't know if we're going to be able to do, you can see up there that I've just given you some basic information on Civil Air Patrol. We're doing this a little backwards, so forgive me if it doesn't all make sense in order. Civil Air Patrol is a 501c3 organization that was chartered by an act of Congress on December 1st, 1941, 6 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor. We were chartered at that time with helping out with the war effort, and after the war, we became the official auxiliary of the United States Air Force. Minnesota Wing has existed since that time, of course. We have 1,509 members as of today. 704 of those members are cadets from the age of 12 through 21, and 612 adult members who are over the age of 21. There's 25 squadrons in Minnesota, 4 groups, 18 powered aircraft, 1 glider. We fly approximately 3,800 hours a year. Yeah, if only we could fly for that, that would be great. To date, this year we've done 3,387 hours in support of missions in the state of Minnesota. We have 25 vehicles, 43 aerospace education schools in Minnesota that participate in what we call the AEX program. Civil Air Patrol nationally has an award-winning aerospace education and STEM program that we provide free to public schools. Any school teacher can sign up and get that stuff, and it's pretty remarkable. We've been doing STEM kits lately, and some of those are really slick. They're a lot of fun. They've got telescopes they give to the schools for free. They got drones. They got all kinds of stuff. And that serves more than 6,000 students in the state of Minnesota, and currently we have 135 teacher members here. Next slide, please. The 3 missions of the organization that we were chartered with in 1947 when we got tied to the Air Force as the official auxiliary when the Air Force became its own thing after the Army Air Corps. is aerospace education of the general public, and I just talked a little bit about that. Emergency services, we do a lot of disaster relief work. We do air search and rescue in the continental United States, and support for state and local agencies throughout the nation. And our youth program, which is really the crown jewel of the Civil Air Patrol. We take young people into our program and give them the opportunity through a self-paced program in which they have increasing responsibility and gain increasing rank in our program to learn leadership and to learn good citizenship and to learn to become dynamic Americans, whatever that means. Next slide, please. We have never had, in 78 years of service to the state of Minnesota, a permanent home. And we have been looking for the right community, reasonably centrally located in the state of Minnesota, in which to build a training facility where we can bring our people on weekends or during the week, whatever, and operate on our own calendar, which would really be nice, because dealing with Camp Ripley and some of the other facilities that we deal with who have been wonderful to us, we are last on the list. And if they have something, you know, somebody in the military sneezes and we're out of Camp Ripley for whatever reason, and that's as it should be. So we looking to build our own facility for the first time. We do have a maintenance hangar, and our wing office is at Fleming Field in South St. Paul. But it isn't capable of dealing with large numbers of people to house them, feed them, and all that. So a couple of years ago, I went to the legislature and said, hey, will you give me some money? And they said yes, which kind of amazed me. So we've been looking for the last 2 years, and Hutchinson was not initially on the radar, to be honest with you, and I'm surprised it wasn't, but we were looking a little closer to the Twin Cities area. And for various reasons, we started to look outside of the Twin Cities, and I'm really glad we did. You folks' community not only is extraordinary, but it's the perfect location. You got a phenomenal airport. You have all of the supplies and all of the infrastructure that we're going to need to run a camp like this. And it seems like you might be interested in talking to us. So at some point, we'll probably come with a more formal proposal, but the idea is that we're going to have a training facility that we'll use for our leadership activities, our cadet activities, everything, pretty much everything we do. Search and rescue training, airplanes, flight training, it'll all be there. And next slide. And then that's just sort of a thank you. We did give you some information. I'm not going to go through it in great detail because you can read it over later on yourself. This little blue page has a story on the back of it about our Cadet Leadership Academy and the Minnesota Wing statistics from 2018, where it talks about the number of people in the organization and how things have changed and the stuff that we've done. Just briefly, the stapled together white pages have a fact sheet. Tells you a little bit about the organization as well. It also shows you that in our congressional squadron and our legislative squadron, it tells you who is members and who isn't yet. We're very fond of having all the members on a city council be members of the organization, so just making the plug, you know.
7 minutes.
Yeah, 7 minutes are up, right? You know, I got work for you to do, let me tell you. There's a map of where the units are in the organization in there, and then some statistics about our cadets and the things that they've achieved in the last year. So I'll let you read that over as well. I do want to point out on the back just briefly that our mission statement is there, our vision and our core values, integrity, volunteer service, excellence, and respect. And the final piece, I'll let you read this over to yourselves as well. This is a report to Congress, and we are a congressionally chartered organization. And as a result of that, we are required to go back to Congress every year and tell them what we're doing. And one of the things that we're very proud of, and don't tell the Air Force because I like to brag about it, is that for the last 14 years we have had an unqualified audit, and the Air Force doesn't. So we're doing pretty good with the finances, which makes me pretty happy. So I don't think we're going to do the video.
Well, we're working on it.
Are we? Okay. Well, if we can come back to it, that'd be great. Do you folks?
Yeah, if he comes back, we'll.
Okay. Any questions for me before I?
You know, when Dave brought this up at Airport Commission, we were talking about it, and I asked Dave, maybe you can shed more light on it.
Sure.
Like, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, they all have Civil Air Patrol,
Yes.
but they have no training facility, correct?
Different states do and different states don't. North Dakota,
Okay.
South Dakota do not. They're primarily reliant on the Air Force bases that exist in those states.
Okay.
Minnesota doesn't have an Air Force base, so that makes it a little challenging here. The Army's been wonderful to us, but again, their training priorities come first. Wisconsin does have a facility over in Oshkosh that they use quite extensively. One of our premier activities takes place over there every year. We call it the Blue Beret Academy. Cadets go there for 2 weeks, and then the second week, they are in charge of security on the flight line for the aircraft. Let's see, in this region, there is no other state that actually has a training facility like this. To be honest with you, the gift from the legislature in the state of Minnesota for this purpose is unprecedented in the nation. The facilities that do exist throughout the nation up till now have all been done with donated dollars. And so the state really has an investment in our organization and is very supportive. The downside is that it's a one-time only grant, and we can't go back to the well. So as the price of steel goes up, I'm worried that's the way things go. But,
So can you share the vision of the facility, or
Sure.
is that too early?
no, the vision is pretty basic. Classrooms, a chow hall, and barracks. And then there'll be a hangar. So it's
So-
pretty basic.
So this is it just for the state of Minnesota, or would you draw from outside the state also?
We will. It'll depend on the activity. The primary purpose will be for Minnesota State, Minnesota Wing, if you will, training activities. But many of those activities take place within the larger regional structure that we're part of. And there's 7 states in the region, the upper Midwest, basically. Not including Wisconsin, we don't claim them. But we will have people from all over Civil Air Patrol come to training activities here. So it will be used more than just Minnesota Wing, but it'll be a Minnesota Wing facility first. So we'll have people coming in from all over buying hotel rooms, so that's a good thing.
That's wonderful.
Anybody own a hotel?
Not yet.
Do we have time for the video?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, you've heard of the Civil Air Patrol, of course. The Civil Air Patrol, the CAP, Vigilant Civilian Volunteers.
With the largest fleet of single-engine planes at their disposal, these patriotic patrols are now playing a key role in protecting the homeland.
The point is, World War II could have turned out a lot differently if not for the men and women of the Civil Air Patrol.
60,000 volunteers across the country who man the Civil Air Patrol's missions, and performing 85% of all inland search and rescue operations.
When Katrina hit, the Civil Air Patrol was there. Sandy, too. And the Civil Air Patrol was on the scene when terrorists attacked our country on 9/11.
lives and we save resources. We are the experienced and we are the future. For 75 years, we have volunteered to serve our communities, our states, and our nation as the auxiliary of the United States Air Force. We will continue to do so with honor. We are the Civil Air Patrol.
Trust me on one thing, when that F-15 goes cruising by you, you know it. It's a lot of fun.
When I saw that, I thought, oh, when the grand opening happens,
You never
maybe
know.
the Blue Angels.
We might even get the Thunderbirds here, you never know. We can always ask.
I've met them.
Have you?
Yes, I have.
That's awesome.
It was.
I haven't actually, surprisingly enough, but I see them all the time. Any other questions, anybody?
So what's going forward here?
What's next? That's a good question. I can tell you what we have done to this point in kind of preparation for a potential relationship here with these guys. Is I've met with the Fair Board. They'd be likely very close neighbors to the fairgrounds on that site. It's kind of north, basically right across the road from the back road into the pits at the fairgrounds is where the driveway would likely be, and occupy some of that property on the right along Airport Road, northwest of where the former Skydive Hutchinson building is. So that's the site we would look at probably first, and then I talked with the Parks Department, with the city Parks Department, and also with the county Parks Department and the fairground staff to let them know that, there may be times when there's up to, I think we were talking roughly 120 boys, 30 girls, perhaps needing some of those facilities that would be available at the parks, for example, to fly drones, or perhaps at the fairgrounds for physical fitness activities, particularly in the winter when it's kind of too cold to run around outside and things like that. And everybody's, so they're clued into it. They would be happy to provide whatever they could and whenever they could to accommodate these folks. And so then the next biggest struggle was to look at the utilities to serve the site. Currently, we have gas service and electrical service. Would be no problem whatsoever. Roughly 300 feet to get to the sanitary sewer, also not a big deal. The biggest issue we have is related to water. We want to obviously be served by city water and sewer. So I've worked with Kent and with Keith and trying to come up with a couple options. One of the options would be to come straight off of Edmonton Avenue. In essence, how it was planned to be done, but just sooner than what we had planned. Sure. And then follow the existing sanitary sewer, which roughly runs the shape of Airport Road, approximately 300 feet to the north, and then get to that site, turn the corner, and be able to connect there. Obviously, there would be some benefiting properties off of that. Certainly properties on both sides of Airport Road would have access to water and sewer probably for the first time. So there's some of those kinds of things we haven't quite figured out yet. Really, from a cost perspective, it didn't really matter which way we went with the water. Another option was looked at coming off of Denver Avenue, which would be the back gate to the fairgrounds, and then running along the ditch. When I talked to the fairgrounds, they would, they don't really foresee development in that area south and east of the pits, mainly because they're short on infield space the way it is. But they may think about a project to fill the ditch and install storm sewer and actually expand their capabilities to the south and east, and could potentially do that in conjunction with anything we decide to do. That being said, so the water is probably, like I said, the biggest issue to get the water over there. And so we looked at pricing of both options. It's roughly the same. I mean, it's within hundreds of dollars apart. So at least the initial estimates that we put together. So I'm sure as Kent returns here, we'll talk about putting together a project that would be reviewed, be able to be reviewed by you, and perhaps some of the financing that would go behind that. I have sent, and currently Civil Air Patrol folks are reviewing some of the lease language that we would need to put together. Colonel Garland's an attorney, so he'll look that over.
All my secrets are out, you know.
Yeah, so I'm sure there may be issues they want to address and some things that we want to address. At this point, when we have a commercial lease, we've typically gone with a fairly low lease rate. Among the lowest in the state, actually, because typically there's not a lot of direct services that are needed. So if there were some direct services that were needed, we could talk about some other means of covering those types of costs. But those are some of the things we're doing now. I know with a goal of hopefully, as the Christmas bells are ringing, to be in a position so they know and they can move ahead, and that we know and that we can prepare for a project to serve them. So that's kind of the timeline we're looking at. So I'm sure we'll be back to you several times between now and then to give you updates on what we're finding and what's working. And I've just been very pleased with the support that city staff has given to this project, to county staff, to the fair board. It's been good, and there's people here in Hutchinson that would love to see this come to fruition.
It's a great project.
Yeah, so very neat project. Thank you.
Could I fill in just a couple gaps
Sure.
real quick? The source of the funds, so that you're kind of aware of where this is all coming from, is the airport's fund at DOT. And that's funded by fuel flowage fees at MSP primarily, but every airport. And so as a result of that, the building has to be on airport property. It also has to have at least a 20-year lease. 40 is preferred, or they won't let us move a shovel full of dirt. It also, in my mind, because I've been a member of the organization for a couple of weeks, back many years ago, I was aware of a project in Yakima, Washington, and they built a facility there that, I'm sorry, in Ephrata, Washington, I'm getting the wrong place, and you've probably seen it in the movie Always. There's a big white building in the background of the airport there where they're flying the fire airplanes, and it has a big Civil Air Patrol seal on the side of it. The problem is it's on a septic tank. They get 150 cadets there on a weekend on a septic tank, and they're pumping it every day. It's really a problem. So it has to have, city water, it has to have city sewer, it has to be on an airport, it has to have at least a 20-year lease, 40 is better. Of course, $1 a year is wonderful, but not that I'm campaigning, but so there's a lot of little pieces that kind of all had to fall into place, and your airport really has that. Many others don't. Buffalo doesn't have the infrastructure to support this. A lot of the other airports don't either. Princeton doesn't. And so it really made a lot of sense to come to Hutchinson and see if there was interest here. And so that's why we're here.
Yeah, as they say, there's much in Hutch.
I like that. That's wonderful. I've never heard that before. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. I've heard, why not, my not.
Watching Hutch is better.
There you go, that's much better, yes. Thank you very
Yep,
much.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to compliment the cadet mayor to commentary. They were very professional.
Thank you. That's thanks to Dave and his team here in Hutchinson. They're a phenomenal group.
Did a great job.
They do us proud every year. Thank you very much.
Just wanted to say something too. I think just what John was explaining, the cooperation, that's something that I think the whole community is proud of. It's how we all work together to help get things done. So this project, I think, as mentioned, is exciting to a lot of people, and very thankful that you looked outside the Twin Cities. and
Thank you.
hope
We'd like to
help.
be a partner in the community and be a good citizen, so.
Can I ask one question?
Certainly.
You know, on the news update, it says, you know, the state legislature gave some money for aircraft maintenance facility and the training facility?
Yes.
So we're just talking about the training on this
Correct.
one? Okay.
I made a tough choice, and I don't want to go into the hours and hours and hours of boring details on why I had to make the choice, but we originally started out, the first time I asked the legislature for the money was to complete the training facility and aircraft maintenance facility at South St. Paul that we already started.
Okay.
That was a 3-phase project. We finished phase 1. We'd like to do the other 2 phases. The problem is that as building codes have evolved, it's not practical to finish the project on that site. They want us to spend $1.5 million on a wastewater catchment basin that didn't exist when they gave us the conditional use permit the first time. And that's half the budget, more than half the budget. So we just can't afford to do that. And so the city of Inver Grove Heights doesn't really care as much as some other cities might, and they've kind of made it known that they're not willing to budge on their regulations. So I decided to split the project, which is one of the reasons we began to look outside of the Twin Cities for an airport. And so the training facility will be outside the Twin Cities, which also gets us outside the Class B airspace over MSP. It gets us into an area where we can kind of do our training and marching and all the stuff that we do in a less populated area and a lot more freedom, and just decided to split the project. So what we'll do there, aircraft maintenance primarily will remain there, and we may finish the hangar. The hangar is 60 by 100 now, and it'll eventually be 100 by 100. But we're, at the moment, this is the priority project. Get this done first. If there's money left over, we'll put it there. So.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, why don't we? We're gonna jump down to new business, authorizing resolution number 15091 for the sale of $5,860,000 general obligation improvement and refund bonds series 2019A.
Hey, good evening, council. Just going to bring up a file here if you bear with me. So as you know, we've started our 2019 construction, roadway, and infrastructure improvements. So now we have to figure out how we're going to pay for them. That's why we're here tonight. So I put this together today. I just wanted to give you a brief look at the projects and the funding. So we've got 3 projects this year we're bonding for: the 5th Avenue South reconstruction, the South Grade Road corridor improvements, and the Technology Drive construction. And the estimated costs are about $6.65 million. The funding sources are $1.76 million from municipal state aid, and then another $1 million from the city's enterprise funds, another $1 million from grants, and then $659,000 from special assessments of the benefiting properties, and then $2.1 million from our city tax levies, future city tax levies. We target about 1.9 million for our tax levy. We're a little higher than that, but there's some factors that are benefiting us this year, primarily low interest rates. But those two items in red, that's why we're here tonight. Those are the items we bond for, the special assessments, which we receive from the property owners over a 10-year period, and then our city tax levy, which is paid over, our debt service is paid over a 15-year schedule. But just to jump back, I kind of skipped over it. The percentages you see there, even though we're completing 6.65 million in projects, I wanted to highlight that because a lot of times we hear from some taxpayers that we're not doing enough in the city, but we're spending nearly 7 million on our roads this year, and we're leveraging other sources to the tune of almost 70% of that cost is being leveraged by other sources. We're going to be paying roughly 32% from our tax levy or from our taxpayers, so I thought that was important to highlight. So that's our process or why we're here tonight for the bonded debt, but then we're also here for an opportunity on the water and sewer funds to refinance some existing bonds. And that's mainly to take advantage of the low interest rates. And on the sewer and water bonds, you can see the principal balances there, roughly 1.2 million on the sewer and a little over 1.7 million on the water. And these will be repaid. This debt service is going to be repaid by those water and sewer operations. And I wanted to be clear on that. It's not going to be repaid by taxes. It'll be repaid by user fees and cash from operations within those two funds. So just wanted to share this information with you tonight because it's so easy to just turn it over to Nick and let him do his spiel, but I wanted to give you some background info. So with that said, I have Nick Anhut from Ellers. Yes?
On the refinancing, you know, those will be paid off at the same time period as what they originally were going to be.
Right, same time period, just a lower interest rate, and maybe a little, the principal might be shuffled around a little bit from year to year. So yeah, again, Nick Anhut from Ellers, our financial advisor. He's here tonight to go through the pre-sale report.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Thank you, Andy. Just to recap, the proposed bond issue, again, 5.8 million. 2.8 of that would be new debt to finance just a portion of the city's projects that you are undertaking this year, kind of complete the financing package. With the remaining roughly 3 million to refinance existing sewer and water debt, to swap out essentially the interest rates that you're paying now with potentially lower rates that exist in the marketplace today. Rates have come down roughly, you know, the 10-year treasury rates have come down over a point just during this calendar year, and they're sitting at near record lows at this point in time, so it's a very opportune time to try to take advantage of that. And because the bonds will all be a general obligation, you're able to include all of these financing pieces together into one package and not have to separately issue bonds and duplicate rating fees to financial advisors and legal teams and of the sort. You can kind of reach some economies of scale that way. Rates on the sewer bonds are 3.75 to 4.2%. We anticipate, you know, conservatively that we expect about 2.3 on the refinancing. Hopefully we'll beat that. Rates on the water bonds are at 4 to 4.4% today. That's what you're paying, and we anticipate those closer to 2.4, 2.5%. So all in all, over $200,000 in reduced debt service costs, net of any kind of financing costs associated with this. So it's a pretty lucrative savings opportunity, over 8% on the water bonds. The only item that I have to add to Andy's background would be, you know, we are mapping the levies to fit within the city's debt management policy. So you are levying a certain amount to pay for infrastructure on an annual basis. And so we are customizing the principal payments on this debt to make sure that we fit within those parameters. So that levy amount will be stretched over 15 years, as Andy mentioned, but there is some fluctuation. We'll try to put as much into it forward, fitting within your policy, and then amortizing more principal up front to try to save you on some interest carry over that life. And we'll be able to adjust that with the bids that are presented for your final award in October. I should also add that one of the benefits of issuing general obligation bonds is it does carry the full faith and credit of the city, so your full credit and taxing authority will supplement this in addition to pledging the specific debt levy and assessments as well as enterprise funds for the refunding portions. The city's credit rating currently sits at AA-, which is a very strong credit rating and will allow us to access these low tax-exempt interest rates. Overall, bundling the entire financing together, we're shooting for about a 2.6% interest over the full 15-year term. So very low interest costs, as Andy mentioned. There are, of course, risks associated with general obligation bonds, that being that, if those assessments aren't levied or they aren't paid, ultimately the tax levy is going to be the final stop for the bondholder, that you are basically covenanting that you will levy that tax necessary to service the debt over the term of this bond. But again, we're mapping this out to fit within your existing policy. The city has a very strong history with debt, and we don't view this risk as any significant threat. We also don't think that this poses any risk to your credit rating. We actually discussed this last year. We discuss the 5-year CIP every time we have a rating discussion, and so they are fully aware that the city intended to issue about this amount of debt this year to finance its projects. And again, they've been very comfortable with the city's credit rating in the past. So all that said, should the council choose to go forward, we plan to be back here in October presenting you the results of a competitive sale of bonds. We'll go ahead and solicit bids from national underwriting firms to purchase your bonds at the lowest competitive interest rate, present that to you for a final award on that date. I'd be happy to address any specific questions, or I'm sure Andy can stand for the same.
When will you go out and solicit bids, and why I ask? It sounds like the Federal Reserve is going to be meeting in September, and all indications seem to be the expectation will be a reduction in rates. Does it make sense to wait a little bit?
That's a fair question. I think we don't know what the Federal Reserve is going to do. Our indication right now is that they wouldn't take action until October, but again, I'm not going to tell you when they're going to take action to reduce those rates. I don't feel like the short-term treasury rates that would be affected by that movement would trickle down into a 15-year tax-exempt financing right away. It would probably be something that would take place over the course of several months. Just as the action that's taking place today, or the low rates that are being offered right now, have kind of taken 4 or 5 months of action from the Fed to kind of trickle out into the marketplace. Who knows what they're going to do and how that is going to play. I think we are in a very opportune time right now. Part of setting up the sale of bonds, we need to prepare the documentation, we need to engage a bond attorney, we need to go through a rating discussion, so there is some process that we need to get started anyway, and we'd like your authorization to do that. And again, I think right now the timing and where rates are at are looking very favorable. So, Andy, other than that, just the timing of when you actually need the money to reimburse the funds that you've used already to pay for these projects.
Right, yeah. Since we reimburse ourselves, cash flow is somewhat of a concern, but I'll echo Nick's sentiments there on the trickle down. We see it on our investment side too. When the feds lower the rate, it's not immediate. It's over a course of time, and we see the CD rates dropping periodically. It's just not right then when they announce it. So I agree with Nick. We wouldn't see an immediate impact if the Fed, for some reason, dropped the rates at the end of September. But you would go out for bids the day before we meet for council in October, right? Is that when you get your bids, or is it?
Yeah, so the timeline is we would put together the documentation, go through the rating call, have everything packaged up by the end of this month. We'd go ahead and put that out into the marketplace, give these underwriters a chance to review the city's credit, do their independent analysis, and we'd ask for them to submit bids on the actual day that they're presented to you for award, so they would not be until, the October meeting date when we'd receive those bids. So that would happen after the next round of Fed discussions. But again, as I mentioned, I think the anticipation, it would happen later in the quarter, is at least what we've heard.
Yeah, and just to give you a little history, 2016, I believe, was our lowest interest rate. I think it was down around 1.6 or 1.7. I'm not expecting that low, but I think we're going to see a very good rate here.
I thought we had a conversation with Nick that time.
Nick was going to guarantee last year. Wasn't it last year?
I thought I seen him take a step for the door there for a second.
Just reading an article now that says the Fed funds futures are giving a rate cut 100% chance in September's meeting, so we'll see. But
Put your money down.
Trickle down.
Put your money down.
Yeah, I did have some data on the 10-year treasury, and I don't think I can find it, but it was interesting to see how that's changed over the course of the last few years. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't remember where I stuck it, but
They are entwined, but the Fed funds rate is a different vehicle. It's really how banks borrow from the Fed, and it's very short term. So it possibly could affect maybe the first principal maturity, but it'll take a while. And anyway, the longer term rates are more predicated on economic activity, how the general market is performing.
That's next year, maybe.
We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to approve resolution number 15091. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Andy. We'll jump back up to unfinished business. Ordinance number 19-806, ordinance revising chapter 111, peddlers and solicitors. Good evening, Mr. Sabora.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Great. As you mentioned at the last council meeting, the city council considered both of these ordinances and ended up tabling them because we had a really interesting discussion at the last meeting, and several potential changes were discussed, and we thought it was best maybe to push out a meeting so you would have a chance to think about those potential changes and make a good decision. So the first ordinance I had wanted to talk about was the transient merchant license, and I wanted to just point out some of the changes that we made. You had the presentation from the Civil Air Patrol earlier tonight, which talked a lot about the red, white, and blue, while my presentation is the red, green, and blue. And what I mean by that is, as I go through both of these ordinances, you'll see different print colors. The red print is what was initially in your packet the last meeting. The blue print is the suggestions that are being brought forth to you tonight as a result of your discussion at the last council meeting. And there's portions of it that have green printing, and those portions really arise from discussions that staff had with Councilmember Cook earlier this week. He had brought up some good points that we hadn't talked about earlier, and so they're also going to be up for your consideration tonight. So this first portion of the transient merchant license, we talked about the types of licenses last time, and we had a discussion about how long the temporary licenses should be good for, and we had decided as a group, or at least the consensus seemed to be at that time, that those temporary licenses could be issued by city staff for up to 3 consecutive days. So that's been incorporated in the ordinance for your consideration. One thing that we also discussed last time, you may recall in our draft last time, we talked about not having an exception anymore for the Hutchinson Chamber of Commerce. That has been changed to give them, again, the exception for the Chamber of Commerce for transient merchant type events. This portion in the green was a good point that Steve had brought up. You've heard me say from time to time over the years, and Matt I think has talked about it in a couple of meetings, how we can't require someone to get a license from the city if they grow their own produce. That's contained in the Minnesota Constitution. So at Steve's suggestion, we decided we would incorporate that basically exact language from the Minnesota Constitution that says any person may sell or peddle the products of a farm or garden that they occupy and cultivate without obtaining a license.
I think with the, the chamber thing, it was partly arts and crafts, but there's also dairy days, there's other activities that they've sponsored at times.
They do have various events throughout the year that maybe we hadn't considered at first, and so it's probably a good idea that they're back in our good graces, so to speak. You might recall we had a discussion at the last meeting about how to streamline the license application process, and again, it was the consensus that the city administrator be able to give out, not give out, but issue as many licenses as possible to save both the council time and the applicant's time in case they don't exactly fall in the timetable of a council meeting. So this blueprint talks about how the city administrator can issue all licenses under this chapter, which are the transient merchant and the peddler permits. There's this crosshatched portion that was green. I had decided to take that out basically, again, because of a good suggestion that Steve had made over the past week. We really didn't call attention to what happens if an application is denied. And we thought we should amplify that as part of our ordinance process. So instead of that portion that's crossed out, we added a section here that talks about that if a person has an application that's denied, they have the right to have a hearing before the city council. So it's just more or less adding attention to that and directing the applicant to that process. Towards the bottom of the page here, this section 111.13 talks about denial or a revocation of a license. Again, we're trying to amplify the fact that people realize you can have a hearing if your license is denied. And then again, there was a suggestion from Steve that I thought was worthwhile, and that is there might be cases where that an application is incomplete. And what we're trying to amplify here is that if that is the case, it can be the grounds for denying a license. And the last significant change was something that we had talked about is this 111.16 community festivals. You may recall we had the discussion at the last meeting about how we're going to handle community festivals. We talked about water carnival, talked about arts and crafts, other things that might come up. I mean, more or less, again, the consensus to me anyway seemed to be that you wanted the ability to handle that on a case-by-case basis. So this section basically is reserving to you the authority to handle it in that fashion.
Yeah, and so instead of calling out every community festival, we basically just said that the council's gonna determine whether or not it's a community festival.
Are there any questions about transient merchant ordinance or the changes that are proposed?
Question on like background checks, that's part of that, but when I was looking at all of our licenses, pretty much, isn't there the provision for background check, liquor, tobacco, massage,
Right,
whole list?
correct.
So. Really, the benefit here is some reduced costs, but then also the speed of when somebody could get their license.
Right. You know, that was a factor, something that had been brought to staff's attention over the course of many years is people have a lot of steps that they undertake when they're trying to plan an event.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that planning doesn't necessarily take into account the city council's timetable. And so people are caught in between, you know, meetings and they want to have their event sooner than that. This is a great opportunity for them to have that event while being sanctioned by the city. So then the next ordinance for your consideration is the food cart ordinance, and again, it's going to be the red, green, and blue. The red portions you had already had in your packet from last meeting. Again, talking about the ability of city staff to issue the licenses, the temporary licenses for up to 3 consecutive days. So we've added that in there. I have a note to myself after speaking with Steve, something for you to think about and hopefully discuss, is our food vendor ordinance does not contain any exemption provisions. You may recall for the transient merchant license, we talked about how there's an event at the fairgrounds, Hutchinson Mall, things of that nature that are exempt from getting a license. And also in that transient merchant license ordinance, there's an exemption for religious and charitable organizations. There isn't one currently in our ordinance for food vendors. I had wanted to just, as I said, put this as a placeholder for you to think about. If you wanted to add those same exceptions to the food vendor ordinance, if there's a reason to do that. City staff went back and forth about whether we should automatically include it for your discussion or not. I don't know if you have any thoughts one way or the other on that.
I can see where it might be an event at a church, for example, some food. So technically, without this, would need a permit of some kind. So, or, you know, otherwise there's things at these events, the community festivals, that kind of get covered already.
No, the thing is too, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, when we start talking about churches and stuff, depends on how the food's being. I mean, that gets back into other state laws.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if they want to have a food cart at their, or food cart or vehicle, currently they would need a license. And I think in the time we've been issuing that, I don't think we've ever had any requests for.
Right, if it would be their food cart,
yes,
they would need a license. We'd expect any other food cart or food truck to be having their own license already.
Yes.
So maybe just ponder that as I finish up or continue on with this and we can come back to that. Again, similar to the last ordinance, we talked about city administrator is going to be able to issue all the food-related all the food-related licenses. Again, crossed off this portion because the appeal and hearing provision is amplified later on. I crossed off this portion at the end here about peddlers, solicitors, transient merchants, because that language shouldn't be in the food ordinance, it's in the transient merchant ordinance, so if you're confused, guess what, even I was confused, so.
Copy and paste error.
Right.
So.
Again, the section D talks about an applicant whose license has been denied has the right to have a hearing before the city council, again, to draw attention to that process. And then I believe the last change since last time is, again, talking about community festivals, that if there's some big event that the city normally isn't accustomed to, or I guess even if it is, the city council is going to have the right to basically require what they want at that time. So with that, do you have any questions? Do you have any further thoughts about the exception portion of it? Having that, not having that?
Just leave it this way and then need be hit it again in the future. As far as that exception piece.
I think
What
that
was
makes,
your-
I think that makes sense. Sure.
At the fairgrounds, you have all kinds of food vendors, or at the mall, you have all kinds of food vendors. They all have to get licenses. Is that what we're saying? Then if they're not exempt out, transient merchants?
Be under the sponsorship. Oh,
Well,
Oh.
we are already going to be having, hopefully I don't mix my pages up too much, but we are already going to be having, and I don't know if this is exactly your question, Melissa, but under the transient merchant license, we talk about if there's multi-vendors for transient merchants and people under chapter 123, which is the food.
Right, so that means the fairgrounds or the mall or the event center have to get multi-vendor sponsor licenses,
Right.
but only for food?
If it's food only, correct.
Okay.
Because they are already exempt under the transient merchant.
But they can only have 4 a year? I just want to make sure I'm following it right.
Anything at the fairgrounds is going to be exempt, right?
Do we say that? Okay, that's in the food.
Nope, this is the transient merchants, which refers to the food.
Okay. Okay, so if they're only having food vendors, are they exempt or are they a sponsor?
If they're only having food, they would have to get the licenses, right?
But they can only have 4 a year then?
As is proposed now.
Right, that's why we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
So they can only have 4 a year then? If they're only having food vendors, they have to get a sponsor license and they can only have 4 a year.
food? Just ask.
You-
It could, I mean, I think of, and I'm only thinking of fairgrounds because I
Right.
know what they do out there, but,
No, you had the ribbon a few times out.
well, all this Chalmers and then they
Garlic
have,
Festival.
yeah, the Garlic Festival, and then they have the fair, and then they have,
Sure,
you
but,
might know too, you're out there about
Whatever.
lions. I mean, I'm just saying.
but they
that-
have other transient merchants at the same time, so.
Well,
or-
maybe.
All of those events would.
Yeah. But maybe that is a fair, just to clean it up, that from the exemption part, some of those, the same locations that we have for the transient merchant.
Certainly adding the exemption part to the food ordinance would prevent this exact discussion we're having,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Well, it just
And,
seems like if you're exempt
Right.
from transient merchants selling their goods, then
well,
this
and
same scenario with food vendors.
but you're also exempt even if you're transient merchants and food, they would be exempt at those locations, is the way I understood you
Right.
explain it. So why not just allow either or?
And I would say right now, food vendor events at the fairgrounds are exempt based off of past practice.
Well, right, but.
Because they were always transient merchants before.
Right.
I'm just saying that. I think to make it clear, you think you almost need to
Add,
now, because then now you're gonna be trying to figure out, okay, I just can imagine a conversation we're having with staff. Okay, are you having food there? Yes, are you having any? No, well then now you need a permit, but if you have transient merchant, then you don't need one, I can see.
and Melissa has to deal with it all too.
I,
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a good point.
Or the
Yeah.
event center or
Sure.
whatever, I mean, if they're having.
what do we have to do to clean it up, Mark?
Well, basically, you'd be incorporating the same language in both ordinances, right? At least that's what I would be suggesting.
This exemption language here, right?
Well, and I would assume also then
The charitable.
for the charitable and religious organizations as well.
The one question I had with the charitable ones though was, what if, again, thinking about the food part of it, typically maybe they're doing something on their own property or part of a community festival, though what if somebody wanted to do something just as a fundraiser down in Library Square or some other public property, all on their own? Should they have to have temporary license then? I just see that as a little different than what's normally taking place, I guess, so.
I guess I see your point. I guess I also go back to, currently under our transient merchant license, they're not required to get, there isn't a differentiation with regard to that.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
So they could be soliciting stuff on public property. Right now, we don't prohibit that. We don't. So, what are your thoughts?
Clean it up.
I think it's still worthwhile having the license, we exempt certain groups, now. Just ask, as we expand it all.
Saying get rid of the licenses at all? Or?
Well, I think there's still good reason to have the license to do some background checks, but, and then to know who's out there, especially if there's questions. It's the exceptions on the food vendor. Again, I get them all, and the fairgrounds, I can see that, because those people are gonna be checking some of their own, make sure the vendors have their licenses. And
So really, I think there's a question for the council whether or not they want an exemption portion of part of the food vendor.
Which I think we would, wouldn't we? And
Yeah, I would say so too, the exemption for like the fairgrounds and.
yeah, I see that part of
Yeah.
it, but again, the charitable organizations, I kind of wonder about, a lot of times they could get rolled into these other exemptions that are already being provided, community
I'm trying to think,
festivals.
most of the
or-
time, festivals would seem like the.
Right.
I'm not sure if they have stuff that, potentially the fairgrounds maybe too, but that's.
Well, like St. A's, when they do their fall festivals, you know, they serve food, you know, and so.
But that's not out of the
Yeah.
food part.
Right.
No. And they're a
But-
school, so
Yeah.
state licensed.
Right. But then if they would have a food truck come there, then they would need to have a license, correct?
Correct.
Well, they'd only need a license if it's their food truck.
Right.
The operator of the food truck would have to get the license.
I guess right now, I don't know of any religious organizations in town that have a food
Sure they do.
cart. They have a food cart or truck?
Trailer.
No, but there's a, this gets into the definition. They have to be selling food out of that truck to the
So
public.
what have the Lions done since 1994?
That's what I was gonna say, nonprofits,
yeah.
charitable.
So nonprofit is not
It is right now, but that would be one of the exceptions that.
You guys have been doing it out of the, at the community festivals, right?
Orange Spectacular, the fair.
Yeah.
Those are all exempt right now.
Right. And they should be.
Hutch.
Yeah, I'm with that. No, but that gets back into the past practice.
Right.
Which would still be the same as what we're talking about now, but if Lions wanted to go set up shop
At,
at Library Square, all on their own, that's what you're talking about, Steve,
Right.
right?
yeah.
Right.
I would make the suggestion that we just have the exemption for those locations as the transient merchant. And community festivals are also already incorporated. Let's leave it at that for now. And covers just about all the situations that we've seen.
So, I mean, we could clean up that portion and add something to the
So
food
it's like
vendor.
adding this section
Right.
and not the other section.
Not the religious nonprofit
Right.
section.
So just the locations,
Consent.
not the religious
Yeah.
or charitable.
Right.
No, I say that because again, they would, if they're at an event like this, they're gonna
They're
be
covered
exempt
already.
anyway.
They're
Yeah,
exempt.
Exactly.
They're
Right.
covered already.
So the St. A's Fall Festival though, I don't know, do they
Yeah,
sell?
you're
those
mostly
validators?
No, it's all coming through.
Does anybody know?
They what?
The St. A's Fall Festival, where you say they have food, do they sell
Yeah, it's a
or is
community
it
thing.
provided as part of the festival? Does anybody?
They usually have like a chicken dinner, you know, that they
Which
serve.
is, it's under a different,
I don't
it's
know.
under a
Yeah.
different food regulations from the state,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
And if something comes up that we haven't thought about, adjustment later.
Deal with it then.
So the questions, I think the other question too is, you know, we've seen the proposed changes tonight from Mark. We've got the one additional change, I guess, for the exemptions on the food vendor. Is anybody ready to have, or comfortable in having a first reading tonight? I don't know if we can have a first reading on the food. Well, you know, and quite honestly, I mean, to be honest, a lot of this language is sometimes it's the first time you've seen it too, so, you know, I don't know if it's fair to have a first reading tonight or to bring back all the changes that have been identified as a first reading at your next meeting. One thing I would just note though, that it's not gonna be in time for some of the events that are taking place at the end of the month. And I'd rather us do it right, but I just wanna make sure everyone's aware of that, so.
But otherwise, then it's just kind of past practice type, you know, community events type things and some other ones out there.
Well, You know, I think specifically what Matt's talking about is the brewery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's
Right.
really what got kind of this ball rolling. So,
But there's gonna be other events as,
there are, but I
there's
think
talk
everyone
about.
needs to realize that it's kind of sounding like we're not going to be considering this as a first reading tonight. And so.
There's not gonna be a,
It's not going to be in place by the time Mr. Hart has his event.
Ugh,
this event.
Right, this year, right.
Correct.
that's not good.
But I don't know if he was planning anything bigger than what he's had before.
For Oktoberfest, I don't think so.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
But he did talk about having additional events.
Right.
you know,
Right.
Craft
Yeah.
shows
Yeah.
and
For
some
Oktoberfest
stuff.
specifically, I think,
I don't think he was planning on having.
no, maybe you can have the food trucks that are licensed for that, maybe.
And this is more than just that, as we talked about. I mean, it's, doing
Yeah,
it
and
right.
we don't adopt ordinances strictly for one
Right.
business, so.
So you want to,
I would ask the
Table
council
it?
then to table,
Table it and bring it back.
yeah, both items to our next meeting.
we have a motion to table it?
Make that a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion by Steve, second by Mary to table it.
Is that
For the-
both ordinances?
Both ordinances? Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
With that, though, this wouldn't be effective anyway till we update the fee schedule then, so should that get brought back, or that's like only one meeting that
Yeah,
needs,
exactly. My thought is, once we have a first reading,
Yeah,
I'll bring that the second reading.
got it.
And technically, they don't become effective until they're published. So,
All right. Setting annual city recognition event, public meeting for November 4th, 2019.
yeah. Mayor and council, this is our annual recognition event that we've done in the last several years. I've given a state of the city report at this event. Kind of looking at everyone's schedules, we thought the best time this year would be to have it on a Monday evening, November 4th.
There was a Parks Board meeting at that time.
We can always go to the Parks Board meeting.
I'll double dip.
See who's serving better food?
Right.
I have a library board meeting the same time too, so.
Yeah, it's, this year, just with several events going on, it's just tough to,
Just gotta fit it in.
yeah. so.
Well, your boards are invited to come anyway,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
That's right.
You can break off and have your meeting.
Right. What time are you thinking?
It's we'd be, well, 5:30 is check-in social time, dinner, 6:30, and 7:15 is usually to do the city report.
Got your speech already?
I haven't started
And your
yet, so-
jokes?
So I'll be working on it, so.
I hate to tell you, Mary, but you dug up some pictures.
I'll make a motion to set the event on the 4th.
Second.
Motion by Chad, second by Dave to set that event for November 4th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Resetting December 24th, 2019 city council meeting.
Yeah, Mayor and council, since we're already starting to get questions about when the council's gonna meet in that second meeting in December. It's currently scheduled for Christmas Eve. Obviously, we always try to avoid holidays like that, and so, I know last year, I think, it was supposed to be on Christmas Day, and we had to reschedule it, and so, I guess, we're hoping that we can reschedule that now, just so we can start planning for that, and so everybody is aware of when that meeting's gonna be, to reschedule. You know, my recommendation, if it works for everybody, is to have it that Monday, December 23rd at 5:30. Otherwise, you're probably looking at a Thursday before, after. Having a little bit earlier just runs into some issues with payments and stuff, but, so.
How about Thursday the 19th, in case people need to travel?
That would be, I guess, if you were to ask me for alternative days, it'd be the 19th or the 26th, but 26th is the day after
Oh, that's a bad day.
Christmas, yeah.
That's a shopping day.
I'm kind of with Chad. I mean, you know,
Does the 19th give staff enough time to do what they need to do? Or is that too early?
Planning Commission has always been kind of the one that's.
Depends on,
kinda
yeah,
out
what they
there.
have for, that would be
'Cause
the,
they would be. And, but
but if they meet the 17th, I would, hopefully they'd have, if they had something, they'd probably push in a little bit, get it in front of the council.
we could just add that to the agenda, or it depends what it is, I guess.
Well, or maybe Dan has to look at maybe moving up the planning commission day just to account for the fact that that's when the second meeting for the,
Sure.
the council's gonna be.
well, we're a couple months out, so I think they could kind of plan for it.
Yeah.
They would have.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why
Push it
we wanna
through.
try to do it now, so if there's some
To
things that
plan
need to
for
get moved around, that staff is well aware of that.
I would say the 19th.
I'll make a motion for the 19th at 5:30.
I'll second that.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to set the council meeting for the 19th of December.
So we would be doing our levies and all that at that meeting,
that
so
meeting.
that's where you'll be
To get
okay to
notices
do
out and
everything.
So, yeah. Because most likely we'd have our truth and taxation, like, I think it's either the second or the 3rd or 5th of December, so it'll be our first meeting, December 10th. So, that should give us enough time to.
Okay, call the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. All right, we have, the City of Hutchinson Financial Report and Investment Report for July 2019, EDA Board Minutes from July 31st, 2019. John, you have anything else for us tonight?
No, unless you have questions.
Update on Fifth Avenue
It's fine.
and the roundabout?
Oh, sure. Fifth Avenue, if everything goes right, could open by Friday. There's a few little things left, and, you know, if we get a couple, get at least a day or so of good weather, we should be able to open it up by Friday.
Doesn't sound like we're gonna have a good day.
It's not looking like it, but.
What needs to be done, just striping?
There's some
or-
striping and just some minor, mainly on the sides, you know, where alleys and side streets and things like that come in, so. We met on the South Grade Road, corridor improvements there. Again, weather is gonna dictate a lot of it, but there's probably 2 days of concrete work left on, leg east of Merrill. And we could see some bituminous, base course being put down. And then there would be the milling operation to the west, and then the final lift would be all together. All of the utilities are completed though for that project, so there's no more water and sewer work that needs to be done. And right now they've got, the pedestals for the signals are poured, ready to go, just curing, and that'll be the next big part of it, will be to finish off the signals on
Are we
both
gonna
sides.
see the signals? That Kent was saying that
Yeah.
there's kind of a backlog on.
Yeah, we got a little bit of, at least on from the lighting side, and signals we're hoping will follow suit. They're actually kind of catching up a little bit, so hopefully we'll be able to meet that end of the month deadline. Who knows? Wait to see, but we're still shooting for, working on that in earnest towards the end of the month here, so. Okay.
Before you sit down, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
First off, I think Fifth Avenue looks really good.
Mhm.
I mean, I drive by it every day and look at it. But I've heard a couple of concerns from the people who are living on Fifth Avenue, that where the grass is coming up, I mean, the grass is coming up really good on the new sections, but that it's really lumpy.
Oh, okay.
So, they're trying to mow and they said it's
Oh,
going
sure,
like this, so.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk with Chad about that, and that's some of the final things that are trying to
Right.
being taken care of, but I'll have him look at that for sure. Yeah, that's always a challenge when you get towards the end of that. You know, again, a lot of it depends on the weather.
Right.
When the material is put down and worked and things like that, so. But I'll definitely have them take a peek at it along the whole route and make
Right,
sure we're
well,
okay.
and I've heard it like up from the part from Lynn, you know, the newest part
Kind of
in
the,
there.
right, to the west end
Right.
of the project, yeah, which would be the last bit that was put in, so, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Okay,
very good.
thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Yep, thank you.
Mark?
Nothing else tonight.
Mary?
I don't have anything.
Dave? Steve?
You mentioned that truth in taxation, just a reminder, like the county usually sets that, but
Yeah,
make sure we don't overlap with some of the other
We
ones.
usually ask the county when they do it, so it's like kind of avoid that.
School board too.
Yeah. The last 3 or 4 years, we haven't had any conflicts, and that'll be something that we take into consideration, so.
I'm starting to see a lot more oaks that are looking pretty bad, and of course we got the ash at some point. I just kind of wonder, you know, a lot of the trees are on private property, so talked about before, maybe tree removal assessment program, you know, to help the cost, because they can be $1,500 or more to take down some of these big trees, and so it makes sense to look
Sure.
at that, kind of put something in place.
In the past, we have kind of basically, not real formal, but have worked with property owners to come up with an assessment agreement, basically, for the costs of removing a tree on their property. Usually is begun through, you know, a diseased or hazard tree notification, and then moving into perhaps looking at a couple different options for removal, and then, you know, working with the property owner to identify what the cost will be, and to what we've typically done is if it's $1,000 or more, we'll add years on based on the total cost of the project. And then we typically have them assign the same interest rates that they would to an assessment for other projects that have happened that year.
You see, would there be a benefit to having more of a formal policy, just to
That's something-
streamline it a little bit?
Yeah, it's something
Sure.
that we could definitely, you know, work with administration, finance, whoever, and get that a little clearer. I know just recently I sent a note to Mark about something very similar with regard to sidewalk. There's a property owner that's looking at replacing sidewalk. Well, our current policy is that we'll, you know, if it's a third of the property or less, we'll usually take care of it because it's just easier for everybody. But if it gets to be more than a third of the frontage, you know, then we need to figure out a way to, again, perhaps assess that or get those costs covered. So it may be an opportunity to put something together for current services like that is helpful for everybody and everybody understands. So I'd be very happy to work on something like that.
Do we have many beech trees in Minnesota? And
We
I
don't have
asked
a lot of
because I
them. We
heard
we
just
have put a few in, recently.
now they're getting
Yeah,
attacked on the
everybody
East
get
Coast.
it. Everybody gets it at some point. So, yeah, but the bur oak blight we noticed this year was,
It's terrible.
unfortunate. And there's not a lot you can do with it. So,
But I noticed the trees too, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like the oaks, they're not just dropping, they're just, you know, the bur oak blight turns them, you know, like they're
Yeah.
dead and they fall. But big chunks of trees are coming down, you know, sections, you know, like branches, parts of it.
Some
I've
of
never
it,
seen that
right.
before.
So if you do, you know, obviously if it's a hazardous situation, you know, we need to know about them. But I think a lot of it is because of the disease and the stress from because we've looked at oaks all over town, and any kind of, they're just everywhere. You know, it really took off this year, is what we noticed. So you're seeing a lot of oaks that are gonna be dropping leaves in more, you know, as we get into the late August is when it, you know, even mid-August is when we first started seeing it. And so they're gonna be dropping early, and hopefully they'll hang in there. We have had to cut a few down, unfortunately, so, yeah.
And last thing with trees, somebody from Minneapolis told me they started a new program where it's adopt a tree to help water.
Mm-hmm.
And they get a token from one of the microbreweries, you know, in town.
There you go.
But then they also, you know, notices get sent out as reminders, like, oh, we haven't had any water, you know, or
Sure.
rain recently, now would be a good time to water, and
We do put together a packet of information for property owners. What we've found is that the bags work probably the best for, you know, for scheduling the watering to be done. That way we can kind of pick a day during the summer and, you know, send staff out and take care of it
fill
that way.
up the bags then.
Yeah, and that has worked for us the best, but we do provide that information to adjacent house.
Okay.
That, you know, hey, there's a new tree here, and here's some of the things you could do to care for it, so.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Steve. Chad?
I don't have anything extra.
Mr. Yannick?
Just a quick reminder, we've got the wage committee meeting tomorrow at 3. Then the citizen survey has been complete. I'm just waiting for those results. I should get them probably middle of this month, and then I'll be presenting them to the council probably mid-October. So that's it for me.
Any update on the survey? That was out,
The citizen survey?
Yeah.
That's what I just talked
Oh,
about. It's done, and I should be getting
okay.
results later this month.
all right. All I have is, I don't know, Steve, your, Public Arts Commission, I hear that you have 3 openings, but I do have 2 people that are interested, so if it'd be all right with the council, I'll put them on for next month, or next meeting.
Patrick, yeah, Patrick Hiltner,
Yep. Jackie Fausch.
yep,
The
and
other?
Jackie.
Yeah, so I will put those in for, to put them on the Arts Commission.
Good.
With that, ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Steve, second by Dave to adjourn. All in favor?
I
Opposed, carried.